There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
It's always exciting for me to welcome a new guest to Bite Size Book Chats, and here is Rowan in Tasmania, Australia. Rowan, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for having me on.
Rowan and I are Goodreads friends. I don't remember who befriended who. Do you?
No,
No, but we
no.
are. Lucky for me. And I saw that Rowan has read a memoir by an Australian writer, in fact, a Tasmanian writer, which I didn't know that's where she is from until this chat began. And I've heard of her other books, but I didn't know about her memoir. The author is Heather Rose, and the memoir is called Nothing Bad Ever Happens Here, a memoir of loss and discovery. Just came out last November. Tell us about this book, Rowan.
Sure. So it's Heather Rose's memoir. I believe it's her first memoir. She's probably best known for her previous novels, Bruny and The Museum of Modern Love, which have been both quite popular bestsellers. But in her memoir, you can definitely tell she has a background in literary fiction because it has a nice kind of lyrical rhythm to it, which I thought set it apart from many other memoirs that I have read. And it kind of follows her life here in Tasmania, growing up, a very idyllic childhood, until a family tragedy takes place when she's about age 12. And that kind of sets her off on a path of self-discovery and really changes her life and how she perceives certain things. And the book is basically her journey of discovery, figuring out what everything kind of means. And yeah, it was a very fascinating, enlightening read.
She's pretty young. So what era are we looking at from her childhood? In the 60s or 70s or?
Yeah, so the book starts off with Heather describing some of her first memories, which were actually the 1967 Tasmanian bushfires, which was quite a tragic event that took place here. It's about 62 people lost their lives. My mum narrowly escaped with hers.
Wow.
So to begin with, it was already quite personal to me, and I found lots that resonated right from the beginning with being from Tasmania as well.
Does the memoir carry on right up to basically the present, more or less, or?
Yeah, it does. It follows her life really from, the childhood period, but then it heavily focuses on some of her spiritual journey along the way, just her trying to find her place, basically, right up until experiencing motherhood, right up until present day and her current career and her own writing. And yeah, which was another really interesting aspect of the book, just kind of getting inside the mind of a professional writer and her process. And yeah, I found it quite fascinating.
While we're talking, I've been looking her up. She was born in 1964, and so she's 58 or 59. You are Tasmanian and you live in Tasmania, and this was the first book that was kind of by a Tasmanian author that you've read, is that right?
Yes, it was. I mean, back when I was a child, I think I read They Found a Cave by Nan Chauncey or something, but this was, I would say the first book I've read by, a Tasmanian author, which I really enjoyed, actually. It's not often that I would read something like that depicting where I live, so it definitely added another layer to my reading experience, which is really nice.
In your review, you said there are things about it that are distinctly Tasmanian, but many other things that are definitely universal. Can you give us one or two of each?
Sure.
Okay.
A lot of the kind of depictions of nature were certainly distinctly, Tasmanian. She swims with dolphins just on her morning swim here in Tasmania. She treks the overland track with her son, which is one of Australia's best multi-day treks. And her description of the Tasmanian landscape was really quite beautiful. It could even stand alone on its nature writing, basically. It was a really, really nice description. It transported me to various places And then, of course, she takes a lot of her experiences and, embraces other cultures along the way too, both in her time spent living in a Buddhist monastery and exploring Native American culture in the US. So it really was a kind of, a blending of many cultures, which I found interesting.
You said in your review, another one of your favorite parts of it was hiking the overland track with your son. Tell us about the overland track.
So the overland track, I haven't done it myself. I'm probably not the most experienced bushwalker these days, but I think because of that, I enjoyed her description of it even more. It certainly made me want to delve into some of Tasmania's ancient forests, which I have done since reading it. So this book has actually got me outdoors, embracing some of our Tasmanian nature. So I'm grateful for that alone. The overland track, though, I believe it's like from Cradle Mountain to Lake St Clair and takes in a few of Tasmania's biggest peaks. It's quite a vigorous kind of trek. Her son was very apprehensive about it in the book, which I could probably relate to a bit myself. But yeah, it was really heartwarming to read that experience in the book. Yeah.
For a reader that isn't interested in spirituality, would you think that this might not be a book for them, or is it so well written that anybody could enjoy it?
I think probably the latter, Sean. I mean,
Yeah.
it is written very well. You can definitely tell that she's a best-selling, award-winning author and that this is her memoir. It is quite heavy on the spirituality, but I never once felt like anything was being, shoved down my throat in regards to that. And given the context of where that's in, you can understand her embracing and diving into some of these different religions, whether it be Buddhism or Native American ceremonies. So it never kind of felt out of place, which, I'm glad, because I'm probably not overly spiritual myself. So there was enough other things going on for me that,
Wasn't too woo-woo or preachy for you.
There is a lot of woo-woo stuff there, I have to admit. I think some of my fellow reviewers maybe highlighted it was perhaps a bit too woo-woo for them. But for me, I keep an open mind to a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think it was written in a way that I just found fascinating.
So I take it you haven't read any of Heather Rose's fiction yet?
I haven't, but I definitely want to since reading this. And just to frankly embrace more Tasmanian writers in general.
I don't know about Bruny or Bruny?
Bruny, yeah.
Bruny. But the Museum of Modern Love has been quite popular abroad. So that's one I've heard about, and I actually have the ebook on my Kindle. I haven't gotten to it yet, but it's of course set in New York City, I believe. Well, this is great. Rowan, thanks for telling us about the memoir. Will you come back?
I'd love to.
Well, how exciting to have Kendra Winchester, the preeminent booktuber and podcaster and Book Riot correspondent and, goodness, many other hats she wears, back to my little tiny corner of BookTube, bite-sized book chats. Kendra, hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
Great. It's so nice to have you back. And you have just launched your latest venture, Read Appalachia, a podcast about Appalachian literature. Tell us about it.
Well, Read Appalachia is launching as a podcast. It's existed for about 2 years at this point as an Instagram page. But it kind of started because I was scrolling one night and was really frustrated. I couldn't find a Bookstagram account dedicated to Appalachian literature. So I just made one. So I really got caught on. People were very excited about it. And then after Reading Women ended, I was thinking about making into a podcast. I was like, I am not ready. I need time. So I took about a while off, editing, producing a podcast, and it is now launching. It launched on February 2nd, the first episode. So there's a preview episode and then the first episode, and then we'll have 2 more as part of our launch event. But it features books by Appalachian people. And I'm guessing some of your viewers may not know where Appalachia is.
Yeah, that was my
So
next
it
question.
is,
So please.
well, Appalachia is a region in the eastern United States, loosely based around the Appalachian mountain range. Now, that mountain range actually goes up into Canada, but I think the culture specific is the US part of the mountain range. And so it is a very rural part of the United States. It is, but there are like 25 million people in the region. So a nice group. But it's very rural, very isolated, but there's a lot of excellent culture and history that go along with that. My family is Appalachian. We're from Appalachian, Ohio. We've been there a long time, since I think the 1700s. So like we've been there for a hot second, and it's really interesting to see that culture progress. A lot of people aren't as familiar with Appalachia, or if they are, they're familiar with some stereotypes and some problematic representations in media, et cetera. So it's really important to me to promote Appalachian literature so people can find it and celebrate it and love it, hopefully almost, as much as I do.
Just to be flippant for 5 seconds, I guess you're going to be interviewing a lot of Appalachian writers, but I expect one of the people that will not be on your list is a certain writer come senator from one of the Appalachian regions.
Yes, J.D. Vance is not my favorite human, shall we say. He has written a book called Hillbilly Elegy, and back in 2016, and Appalachia was like, this guy's running for office, and he's like, no. He ran and he unfortunately won. So that's one of the problematic representations would be Hillbilly Elegy for sure.
You're going to be focusing on, I think, a lot of Appalachian writers that me and other people that aren't really familiar with that part of the world that will be new to us. But who are some of the big names that many of us would recognize? Writers from Appalachia.
I think most people know Bell Hooks, right? So you have Bell Hooks, you have Nikki Giovanni, the current poet laureate of Kentucky, Crystal Wilkinson, which we'll talk about here in a second. You have Frank X. Walker, who's one of the co-founder of the Appalachian Poets. You have Nikki Finney, who won the National Book Award for Poetry. Ron Rash, Carter Sickles is a newer author. Wiley Cash, Wendell Berry, Charles Frazier, who wrote Gold Mountain. So there's a lot of them, and I just think people know these authors. They just don't realize that they're all from Appalachia.
Absolutely. And when you said Bell Hooks, that was fascinating because I never think that she has a geographical location. She's just a big, wonderful feminist, but she actually came from a place.
She did, and she speaks a lot to something that a lot of people forget or willingly ignore, and that's that Appalachia isn't just a bunch of white people. There are people who are Appalachian from all sorts of different backgrounds.
And we are here to talk about one of your favorite novels, Appalachian novels. It's called The Birds of Opulence by Crystal Wilkinson from 2016. What a fabulous cover. Please tell us about this book, Kendra.
So this is out from the University of Kentucky Press. So this is a university press. And Crystal Wilkinson is the current poet laureate of Kentucky, but this is her fiction. She does a little bit of everything. And this is about a Black women in the same community. And it has several generations of a family, of a couple different families, but it really just looks at the relationship between these women. And it starts out with Yolanda. She is watching her dad on this farm, and she's kind of reminiscing on this land that her family has been on for a while. And then we jump back in time and we get to know her mom and how she came into the world. We get to know her neighbors and how this widow became pregnant after her husband died. And there was a lot of questions of what was going on. Mental health is a big theme in this book. I guess we could call her the protagonist, but it's more of a group chorus. But her mom really struggles with mental health after she's born, and she has postpartum depression. It's a slim novel, but I feel like it definitely packs a punch. So I think this book is a great example of Crystal Wilkinson's connection to Kentucky. When I've talked to her before, and in interviews, she has said that she really struggled with that intersection of identity of being a Black Appalachian woman. She always felt too Appalachian for Black spaces and too Black for Appalachian spaces. And that's kind of how she became one of the founding members of the Appalachian Poets.
Is this her only novel?
I believe she has a short story collection and then I think a work of nonfiction as well. I have not read those, but she also has a poetry collection that just came out called Perfect Black. Well, I guess it came out a couple years ago now.
Would the word saga comfortably fit?
Saga?
Saga? Saga? Do you pronounce that word differently in Appalachia, or I'm just mispronouncing it probably?
I just think it's a Canadian accent. You have a lovely Canadian accent, so I think that's what it is. I wouldn't call this a saga because it's short. I feel like it is a family novel, a multi-generational novel, but it's like packed into 200 and some pages. What is it? It's 202 pages.
And did you feel like you got to really know the characters, or like was it kind of like a short story about each generation, the family as the character through the generations, or did you actually did the characters themselves jump off the page?
I think it's both. For me, I think we do have some returning viewpoints where you return to someone's perspective, but this is like a short story collection around a family, and there are some other women in the community as well. But for me, the real skill of this book was that even though it had those short sections, we really got to know the characters and who they are in such a short amount of space. This is my working theory, is that it's because she's a poet, right? Word choice is so important, and she's able to communicate so much. I think that's what it is, because I've read some books, like you said, that were short stories for different characters, but I didn't feel like I connected with them. But I feel like the magic of this is that she makes it work.
Kendra, thanks for telling us about your podcast and this novel.
Well, thank you for having me on your channel.
Well, this is a very special treat to have Ros of Scallydandling about the books on my channel for a bite-sized book chat. Hello, Ros.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Wow, that's quite a beautiful purple glove you've got there.
It's my very elegant purple cast for my broken hand. Yeah, which is one of the reasons haven't been managing to make content for my channel just recently. So I'm in what do you call it? A hiatus, I think is the word. So it's a treat to be here.
We're very blessed to have you on here. What are we talking about today, Ros? I believe it's a Japanese novel.
It is. It's a real Ros novel in that it's a backlist novel by a woman from the kind of like early to mid 20th century. So that, and it's a woman in translation. So that those are all Ros things, aren't they?
Ros boxes to check.
Yeah. And the book is The Waiting Years by Fumiko Enchi.
Very well-known woman writer that I've never read. Published 1957 and then translated by John Bester. Tell us about this book.
Yeah. Well, I had never read any Fumiko Enchi either. And a commenter suggested to me that I should read it. I was trying to remember who it was so I could thank them, and I couldn't. So whoever it is, if you're watching, stick it in the comments so I can thank you. And thank you so much for suggesting this book, because it was one of my special reads of 2022. Enchi is considered one of the major women writers of 20th century in Japan. She was born 1905, died 1986. So, she sort of spans the century. She's a beautiful stylist. Insofar as from translation, the way the book is structured is brilliant, which is something I appreciate. But also it appeals to me because it's kind of a feminist book, I suppose, but in a subtle way, not knock you over the head with a mallet kind of way.
What is the opening premise?
Well, the opening of the book is one of the things where you really admire her style. Okay, because the story opens and you're in Tokyo. It's I would guess around 1890. You know, we don't know the exact date, but around then. And we're with a mother and a daughter, and they're getting ready for someone who's coming to visit. And the person coming to visit is their former neighbor, Tomo. And Tomo moved away as a kind of a youngish wife with two small children. And she moved away from Tokyo following her husband, who's like a government official. And she's just said she'd like to come and visit. So they said, oh, well, that's great, do come. But they're thinking, well, this is a bit odd. Why is she leaving her husband and coming to visit? What's going on? Bringing her daughter? How come she's got time to come and sightsee in Tokyo for a couple of months? And then she arrives, and we don't yet know, I suppose, that Tomo is going to be the central character of the book. But we find that the reason she's come to Tokyo is because she's coming to look for a maid. So far, so good. But it then emerges that this is a maid, but really she's been sent by her husband to pick a concubine for him. So she, the wife,
that's really
been given
rude.
the job. Yeah. He has sent her to go and pick a suitable second wife or concubine to join their household, and she's hoping that her old friend, their old neighbor, will help her find a girl. Now, I said it was a feminist book, didn't I? And that doesn't sound like that. How could a woman do that? How could a woman choose another 15, 16-year-old woman to come and be taken to another place and used in that way? But I think what Enchi does in this book is she's really helping you understand the position of Japanese women at the end of the 19th, early 20th century. And that was a kind of a time of change. And so Tomo is this, in some ways, she's quite a frustrating character to read in the 21st century. But, she was married herself at 15, an arranged marriage. She sees her role to make her husband's life work. And if he sends her to find him a concubine, she's going to try and do that right, as it were. So what an interesting premise for a book.
Wow. And I was thrown off by the name Tomo, because typically that's a man's name, but depending on how it ends, like Tomoe is a woman's name and so on.
Ah.
Tomoko
Yes.
Tomoko is a woman's name,
Mm-hmm.
but Tomo I've only ever heard as a man. So now I've got that all straightened out. So the three of them shack up.
Well, so she does find a girl who's like from a family that have fallen on hard times, and this girl thinks she's going to be a maid, but her parents kind of say to her, essentially she's bored, and her parents say to her, oh, you must do whatever, your master wishes, sort of thing, which she doesn't understand until later. But it's like the husband, I think, sees himself as a very civilized man, and it isn't like she arrives and she's told to just jump into bed. He kind of like adopts her as a daughter, register her as part of the family, and is pays her a lot of attention and buys her presents and sort of, and then eventually sort of takes her to bed at the point where she kind of feels she doesn't want to, but she feels obliged. But he sees himself as someone who kind of knows how to please women. He doesn't see himself as like a rapist. You know what I mean? Tomo, meanwhile, is struggling to maintain her position in the household, and how she does it is by being like she manages the whole thing. She runs the whole thing. She manages, the household finances. She manages all their lives. She tries to protect these girls. She tries to make sure they're financially secure, and so she takes responsibility for it all, and she's not happy with it. And over the course of the novel, you see, in a sense, because it follows them from, I say, around 1890 to around 1920, I guess. And she is more and more angry.
You have taken me to a place where I very much want to read this book as soon as possible, Ros. Thank you.
I think it would be a Sean book, this one. I really
Sure
do.
sounds like one. Well, while you're on your hiatus, I'd like you to come back on a weekly basis to my channel. How's that?
I will.
What a delight to welcome Bonnie from Buffalo, New York, back for her second appearance on Bite Size Book Chats. Bonnie, hello.
Hello, Sean. Good to be back.
I have been wanting to have you back for a long time, and I've been watching your Twitter feed, which will be in the link to that will be in the show notes, for books that you've finished. And goodness, was it just before or just after New Year's, you posted about the book Drifts by Kate Zambreno, and your reaction to that book reminded me of my reaction to books that speak very deeply to me, that I am so swept away by that I am rendered mute. And it wasn't like your tweet was mute, but you were just really agog about this book. So I thought, oh my God, I got to have Bonnie come on and tell us all about that. And it was published originally 2020. Tell us about this book.
Okay. First of all, I will say this book is not going to be for everyone. This book shouldn't have been for me because it was very much out of my wheelhouse. No plot, really. If you're looking for a book with a beginning, a middle, and an end, this isn't the one. But if you're looking for a book about writers plying their craft, if you're looking for a book that will refer you to a million other books, if you're looking for a book that shows how isolating and solitary and lonely writing can be, and if you're looking for a book that each sentence is a gem, one following another throughout the whole book, this book is going to be for you. It really blew me away.
You said at the outset, this book may not be for everyone. And then your next sentence was a gem, because then you said, I didn't think it would be for me. So I just want to make sure everybody watching, if you don't think this book is for you, you might be like Bonnie. So listen up. Please continue.
Yes, I think so. If you know Twitter, you know there's a pretty big reading community, and people have been talking about Kate Zambreno for a long time. I didn't know anything about her. And then I finally said, well, I'm going to try something. And I tried this. And I followed it up with another of her books because I was just so impressed with her writing. Here's what she does to you. And apparently she does it in every book. You're reading along, and all of a sudden she mentions a writer, a poet, an artist, a photographer, a filmmaker. And all of a sudden you're going down the rabbit hole to find out about these people. And I'll be reading along, and all of a sudden I find myself on YouTube watching a video or a little short film that was done by Joseph Cornell in the 50s. Very grainy, but lovely. And that is what this book was like. It was leading you from one artist to another artist to as I say, a photographer. It was just so different from anything I had ever read. And in the meantime, she's talking about her life in Brooklyn as a writer and her correspondence with other writers. These are all things that she brings into the book. Just you're watching her walk her dog. She takes photographs. The book has a lot of photographs in it. She takes photographs of her dog. She's not a photographer, but they're interesting. And you're watching her or listening to her tell about walking through her neighborhood, walking through the park, dwelling about her writing and how she's going to produce this book that she's got a contract for, and she's expected to produce by the end of the summer. In the meantime, she brings in all these outside things. You can tell right from the beginning, she's a brilliant, brilliant writer. She's got so much going on in her brain, and she's putting it all out there. And it's like something unfurling, and it unfurls from the literary and the artistic into her life and her dog and her body and the awful health insurance we have in this country, and how she can barely afford it. And she gets practically nothing from it. And it all comes together somehow. I don't know how she does it.
This was a kind of a rabbit hole of a read because you just kept going to Google and falling down rabbit holes. Tell us about one writer that was new to you that this book has got you itching to read.
Kafka. I haven't read any Kafka. I just ordered his new book of diaries, and I've got a book of short stories coming to me of his relationship with his wife, the moving, because she was a sculptor, the moving, and I got that out of this book. I didn't know anything about him. I knew the name, but that was it.
I only know one thing about his writing. I've heard many people say that his writing is Kafkaesque.
And then, of course, there's artists and photographers and filmmakers.
I'm chomping at the bit to get to it. Bonnie, thank you so much for telling us about it.
Thank you, Sean.